Welcome back, Chapter 8. Jocelyn lay in bed for a while, her hands behind her head, and looked at the ceiling of the bedroom. The house was hers, but since she'd arrived, she had very little time to herself. She glanced at the bedside clock and saw that it wasn't even 7, and she didn't have to be anywhere until 11. She used the time to look at the house thoroughly, not in the courtesy way she had done. She washed and dressed quickly, not bothering to blow dry her hair, but pulling it back off her face. She glanced at her shiny skin, thought about putting on makeup, but didn't. Miss Eddie was of the Estee Lauder school that believed a woman should wear full makeup at every moment. Even at the end, Miss Eddie had dressed beautifully and always wore lightly applied cosmetics. But this morning, Miss Eddie's voice seemed farther off than usual, and Jocelyn didn't want to take the time to put on war paint, as her father used to say. She wandered through the upstairs, noting what was there. Her bedroom had the most furniture in it. The second bedroom had a bed and a little table by it, but nothing else, and the third bedroom was empty. At the end of the hall was a window with a door next to it. She already discovered it opened to a narrow, steep staircase that led up to another door that was locked, the attic. She remembered Ramsey telling her that it was full of trunks containing old clothes and diaries. As a researcher, she was looking forward to seeing those old diaries, and she wondered if the true story of Miss Eddie David was written down somewhere. Downstairs, she went into the living room and looked at the familiar furniture, and for a moment, she was lost in memory. She and Miss Eddie had spent many an afternoon on that yellow couch. When it needed reupholstering, they had a good time looking at fabric samples and choosing one with honeybees on it. They talked and laughed together as they sat there, and Jocelyn had to leave the room as the memories were too strong. The dining room needed a table and more chairs. There was a downstairs bath, a smaller parlor that had a cabinet with 2 lamps on it, but nothing else. She went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and looked around. She loved the big sink, loved the heavy pie table, but the stove was an eyesore. Holding up her hands, she formed a square with fingers and thumbs and imagined a big stainless steel 6-burner there with double ovens, she said out loud. But it would be ridiculous to put in such an expensive stove, she thought. After all, she couldn't cook. That she'd often made cupcakes and cookies for Miss Eddie fundraiser tea parties didn't count as actual cooking. But Luke's talk of an herb garden and Joss' memory of the lavender cookies she used to bake had made her think of a kitchen and of a home. She looked in the refrigerator and saw that there were eggs, milk, orange juice, and bread in there. She frowned for a moment, then shook her head in wonder. It looked like while she'd been out with Luke yesterday evening, someone had put them in her refrigerator. Sarah? Ramsey? Somehow she didn't think it was Tess. She used one of the pans from the day before to make herself scrambled eggs and toast and ate while looking about her. If she did have the money to remodel the kitchen, what would she do to it? Gut it and put in lots of granite and recessed lighting? The very thought made her shiver. Before she knew it, it was after 10 and she needed to get dressed to meet Ramsey. Jocelyn had heard that the Trillis restaurant and knew that it was quite upscale, so she put on her new oatmeal color linen trouser and her new pale pink knit top. Ramsey seemed to like her in conservative feminine clothes. Her suitcase was still on the floor, not yet fully unpacked. In the back, in the big zipper compartment, she pulled out a framed photo of her and Miss Eddie. It was the only one she had. Belle had taken it one Sunday after she received a digital camera for her birthday. Of course, the Steps hadn't been invited to Miss Eddie's house, but both Steps liked to show up unannounced, as though they hoped to see something they shouldn't. "What do you get out of staying over there all the time?" they used to ask. "The house is boring and the old woman is mean. There's nothing to do." Jocelyn didn't bother to reply, which made them furious. Why try to explain to two girls who only thought of how they could decorate their bodies? Jocelyn had known better than to ask for the photo. The Steps would never be so kind as to just plain give it to her. At best, they'd make her pay for it by doing something for them, such as writing a couple of school papers. At worst, they'd destroy the photo just for the pleasure of doing so. In the end, she waited until the twins went out. Then she'd taken the card from the camera, copied the photo onto her laptop, and put the card back. That was smart. Later, the Steps taunted her with the picture, since they knew she wanted it, but Jocelyn just shrugged. As she knew they would, they erased the picture off the disk. Now, she put it on her bedside table. She and Miss Eddie were standing side by side in front of a Mr. Lincoln rosebush. The deep red of the rose contrasted nicely with Miss Eddie's white linen dress. She was smiling at Jocelyn in a way that showed her love, and Joss was smiling back in the same way. When she first saw the picture, Jocelyn understood more of why the Steps were so jealous of her. Not even their doting mother looked at the twins like Miss Eddie was looking at Jocelyn. With another glance at the clock, she hurried to finish dressing. It was soon running down the steps to the front door. When she opened it, she gasped. 3 women were standing on her doorstep, and she nearly ran into them. "So sorry to have frightened you," said one woman. "You're off to see Ramsey, aren't you?" asked the second. She had on jeans and a t-shirt and looked too young to have gray hair. She'd seen them at church, had even been introduced to them, but she couldn't remember their names. For all she knew, one of them was Ramsey's mother, or Luke's. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay. I'm late as it is," Joss said. "That's all right. He'll wait for you," said the third woman. "We came to get our dishes and to see how you're doing. Did you like the squash casserole I made?" Jocelyn began. She didn't know whose dish was what. "Don't mind her," said the woman in jeans. "We all know what you did with the food. That was Tess' idea, wasn't it? And noble of you girls to do that." "Yes," said the first woman. Her hair was dyed a dark red that looked good on her, and by the roll around her middle, she didn't bother going to the gym. "We know how noble Tess is." She rolled her eyes when she said it and looked like she wanted to giggle. The way they spoke of Tess made Joss give a silent thanks to Luke for not telling that he'd been in her house after Ramsey left. She didn't want these women rolling their eyes over her. "The dishes are on the table in the kitchen," she said as she went down the stairs to her car. "Help yourself, and thank you all so very much. You made me feel very welcome. I can't possibly thank you enough." She opened her car door and got inside. She put her hand on the window and waved as she went through the gates. The women were standing on her doorstep watching her. "I'll probably be branded as the rudest Yankee ever to have moved to Edelin," she muttered under her breath. Minutes later, she saw Ramsey's office, and he was sitting on the sidewalk in front. Beside him was a big picnic basket, and under him was a folded quilt. When he saw her coming, he got up and put the quilt in the basket over his arm. She pulled to the curb. He opened the passenger side, got in, and put the items in the back. "Bigger than it looks," he said, looking at the interior of the car. "I bet you say that to all your dates." "Only a few of them," he said in a husky way. "So where are we going?" she asked, even as she started to turn toward Williamsburg. "No," Ramsey said, "go right." But what?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. "I just assumed we were going into Williamsburg." "I thought about it, but there's time to do that later. I thought we might spend some time alone together." "Alone together?" she said under her breath. "What?" "It's just something I heard and I liked it. Alone together." "Turn here," Ramsey said at a sign that said they were now leaving the state of Wilderness Park. "Unless you want me to drive." "No, I'm fine." "So how many ladies did you get this morning?" he asked. "Surprisingly few. There were 3 of them on the doorstep as I left. I almost knocked them down." "So who were they?" She glanced at him. Right, he said, smiling. You have no idea. Describe them. Dark red hair, not natural, not athletic. Not athletic. How diplomatic of you. That's Ken's mother. You haven't met him, have you? I thought I was going to meet him today, but you were outside waiting for me. Tess' idea. She said everyone would be staring at you, so if I actually wanted to talk to you, I should take you away. Ah, Josh said. I'm not sure that's a good sound. What does mean? Luke said that Tess runs your life. In fact, everyone says that. And she does a good job of it too, Ramsey said. He's so proud of that fact, he ain't getting a clue. Please tell me you're insanely jealous and you like to snatch her bald. Josh laughed. Sorry, but no. She's abrasive and has a chip on her shoulder the size of a mountain, but I almost like her. If you do, you're only the second woman in town who does. You and Sarah. The girls in the office are terrified of her. They run into the restroom and talk about her so much that now if Tess is going in there, she yells, incoming, then gives them 3 seconds to shut up. Why would they hate her for that? Josh asked, wide-eyed. Beats me, Ramsey said, smiling. Turn here, down this dirt road. There, that's it. Park under that tree. She pulled under a big oak tree and got out of the car. Ramsey got out, then pushed his seat back and removed the basket and quilt. Can you bear another picnic? He asked. It was beautiful where they were. Overhanging trees closed them in, and she could hear running water in the distance. If this is where the picnics are, I can stand them every day. Come on then, Ramsey said as he started walking. She followed him down a path until they came to a meadow that was covered in spring wildflowers. It was while they were crossing the meadow that Jocelyn got the idea that Ramsey had something important to tell her, something that he didn't want to say in a public place, like his office or a restaurant. She hoped it wasn't something that was guaranteed to make her cry. When he looked back at her, she said, "It's beautiful here," and gave no hint as to what she was thinking. Virginia on a bad day is still the best there is. And this is a scientific observation? Yes, utterly without prejudice. He was walking backwards in front of her, through the meadows, the sunlight glistering off his hair and his blue shirt. Keep looking at me like that and we'll never get back to the office, he said, teasing. Why, whatever do you mean, Mr. McDowell? When he reached a row of trees, he slowed as he walked into them and waited for her to catch up. My grandfather planted these trees, he said once they were in the shade. Does that mean you own this land? My sister and I do. She and her husband are building a house on the other side of the meadow. Do you plan to build here? Maybe, Ramsey said. They had come to a little creek with willows hanging over the water. Do you like this place? Oh, very much. Where would you put your house? He gave her a sharp glance. You're worried that I'll put in some concrete monstrosity in the middle of the meadow, aren't you? He spread the quilt in the shade on a flat piece of land. It did go through my mind. Farther up is a site where an old house burned down. The trees are gone and it's open land. I'd build there and keep all this exactly as it is. He motioned to the pretty little creek as he put the basket on the quilt and opened it. I have no idea what's in here. Tess, he broke off. Tess packed it, Jocelyn said. I know, I'm getting a picture. I guess you heard what we did with all the welcome food that was left at my house. Yeah, Ramsey said, smiling. Tess is like that. She thinks of people with less than she has. As Jocelyn looked at him, she again wondered how much was between him and Tess. Don't you start too, he said as he pulled a loaf of bread out of the basket, and she knew he meant speculating on him and Tess. If this is from Aunt Ellie's store, you can bet that it's half twig and a quarter bark. You don't like it? I love it, he said loudly, then lowered his voice. But sometimes when I'm out of town, I order tuna on white. Not whole wheat, but plain old white bread. Every time I do, I expect Aunt Ellie to run through the door and lecture me on my digestive system. Tell her that white bread goes well with tequila. At that, Ramsay gave a laugh. You have picked up a lot about our residents, haven't you? One or two things. She got on her knees, brushed his hands away, and began to unpack the basket. It was full of things that she loved: brie, crackers, olives, 3 kinds of berries, what looked to be homemade pâté, coleslaw, and a bottle of juice. Ooh, lovely. It's my guess that Tess watched what you ate yesterday, memorized it, and applied it to the basket. How scientific, Jocelyn said as she spread the meal on a quilt. There were plates in the bottom, and she put them out. She unscrewed the cap off a bottle of juice and started to pour some into a paper cup, but he took the bottle. She watched as he put it to his lips and drank. She liked that he didn't swallow the rim, but put his upper lip across the top. She looked out at the stream and said, Would you like to tell me whatever it is that you're dreading telling me? He gave her a look of astonishment and shook his head. Remind me never to play poker with you. What did I do to give myself away? I don't know. There just seems to be something serious in your eyes today. And from what I gather, taking me out here on a second date is out of character for you. The curses of living in a town where people know me, he said, but he didn't smile. I haven't been to bed all night. My father and I stayed up and he told me what I've come to think of as the great family secret. And now you have to share it with me? Is it as bad as all that? Maybe, Ramsay said, looking away from her. It depends on how you take it. So tell me, she said. He filled a plate with food and took his time before saying anything. Miss Eddie and my grandfather were great friends, and they exchanged letters until he died. Even when I was a little kid, he read the letters to me, and as he got older, I read them to him. Miss Eddie used to write a lot about you. She was proud of your intelligence, but she never mentioned what a good observer of people you are. She was watching him intently. If he read letters written by Miss Eddie, then he must know a lot about her, Jocelyn. That he knew so much about her was a shock. She tried to quieten her pounding heart. Did he have something truly awful to tell her? I had to be nearly clairvoyant to survive the steps. Ramsay smiled. My dad and I followed their career, he said, from their first catalog work all the way to Milan. Are they as horrible as Miss Eddie said they were? Much worse, Jocelyn said impatiently. Is what you have to tell me so bad that you can't get the words out? So all this time he knew all about her. There is no money, he said quickly. No money? Last night my father told me that you get the house, but there is no money with it. None at all. I don't understand, she says. I mean, I wasn't really expecting millions, but Miss Eddie lived quite well. I can support myself, but that house will need maintenance. I know, Ramsay said softly, and my family that is, will help you with that. But there isn't any money. As for Miss Eddie's expenses, he shrugged. How long was she without funds? She was self-supporting until she moved to Florida. After that, the house in Edeling and all the work she did for the town were paid for, and Bertrude's expenses. Who paid for her house in Florida and her charity work there? My grandfather. And he would be Alexander McDowell. Jocelyn looked at the stream for a while and thought about all she heard in the last few days. Lissy's husband? She asked softly. Did Miss Eddie tell you about him? Not a word. She didn't tell me about Edelyn, much less anyone who lived here. I didn't know she owned a huge old house. Didn't know. She had to take a few breaths to calm herself. Miss Eddie mentioned Alex and Lizzie McDowell in the letter she left me with her will, and Sarah mentioned a Lizzie who married the richest man in town, so I put it together. Her great aunt, Ramsey said under his breath. What? Lizzie was Sarah's great aunt. She married my grandfather at the beginning of World War II, and from what I can piece together, it all started just before then. What started? Joss asked, looking at him, and she could see the strain on his face. He hated telling her all of this. She smiled at him. Come on, lighten up. I was poor yesterday, and I'm still poor. So what? I never expected any financial reward from Miss Eddie, so there's no disappointment. When he turned to her, he looked so relieved that she poured him a cup of juice and handed it to him. I wish it were wine. Me too. He lifted his cup to her. To you, Miss Jocelyn, as much a lady as ever lived. Jocelyn laughed. What did you expect me to do? Throw a fit? Rage at a woman who left me no money in her will? What would the steps have done? Did, Jocelyn said. Then she told him about the piece of coal that Miss Eddie had cut into jewel shapes and left for them. I was back at work when they found out, and I wouldn't pick up the phone for their calls, but they left some blistering messages on my machine. I played them over and over. I don't think I've ever had such pleasure. When Ramsey looked at her, she could see that he was still burdened by what he saw as terrible news. So tell me the whole story, Joss said. Why did your grandfather support a woman he wasn't related to? I don't know, and neither does my dad. All we know is that Miss Eddie's family was the most prestigious in town, but Alex McDowell family was the wealthiest. We know that something bad, awful, happened in 1941, and Miss Eddie helped my grandfather Alex, but we don't know the details. For most of her life, Miss Eddie worked with burn patients all over the world, Jocelyn said. Right, and she supported her brother and paid for the upkeep of Edelyn Manor. When she retired, she moved to Boca Raton, in a house near us. Jocelyn had her knees drawn up, her arms around them, and she was listening to him intently. Owned by your grandfather? Yes. Between supporting her brother and keeping up the manor, plus all she gave to people in need along the way, Miss Eddie had nothing. My grandfather bought that house and she lived in it rent-free. Why didn't she go back to Edelyn? Joss asked. That's part of the great mystery, Ram said. Dad said that Bertrand wanted to go to Florida to live with her, but Miss Eddie said he had to stay in Edelyn and look after the house. He had to keep it intact for the future, but neither of them married, and they left no heirs. So he didn't gamble the family fortune away? Joss asked. No, Ramsey said. My dad said that Bertrand liked that people thought he was a compulsive gambler who spent everything on the ponies. Bertrand said it was much better than being known to be just plain broke. So Miss Eddie left me a white elephant? Pretty much, yeah. But the good news is that the house is yours, free and clear, so you can sell it if you want. It would probably bring in $1 million or so. $1 million or so? She sat still, hugged her knees to her chin, and looking at the water. What about Luke? You said you paid his check. Weren't you to be reimbursed when I inherit the money? Ramsey shrugged. He doesn't earn much, so I pay it out of your own money, Jocelyn said flatly. Look, don't worry about Luke. He's not poor by any means. He has other income. What does that mean? Telling you my cousin's business is not something I'll do. Let's just say that Luke hasn't had an easy life, but money isn't his problem. She can tell that Ramsey wasn't going to say any more about that. What I don't understand is how Miss Eddie lived as she did if she had no money of her own. We went to the opera. She attended charity meetings. And I know she contributed. We did all this together. How could she do that if she had no money? That was her job, Ramsey said. My grandfather set up a trust and Miss Eddie's administered it. He knew his son, my father, would hate having to deal with all those meetings, so he left it to Miss Eddie to do. From a house in Boca? Josh said. Does that sound odd to you? Yes and no. I think my grandfather trusted Miss Eddie more than anyone else, and since she didn't want to return to Edeling, where people still talked about the fact that she was an old maid, it worked out well. And Dad said he thought she didn't want to live with her brother, and the cold hurts her legs. I'm sure there was 1,000 reasons for it all. I think my grandfather and Miss Eddie worked it out so they were both happy with everything. My dad says she did a great job at administering the trust. She spent a lot of money on me, Jocelyn said softly. Last night, Dad told me that my grandfather and your grandparents were friends. I think that's why he bought that house, so she could be near them. Jocelyn gave a sigh. Yet another lie, or something that was hidden. Miss Eddie never told me that my grandparents were friends of her friend. She took a breath. So many secrets. She looked at him. Does the whole town know that the Harcourt family was destitute? No, Ramsey grimaced. It was such a secret that until last night, even I didn't know. My dad said he used to go to Bertrand twice a year, and they'd drink 50-year-old brandy and laugh about the poverty of the Harcourt family. Jocelyn, you have to understand that I knew nothing about this. I believed the papers I saw and thought you were inheriting about $3 million plus the house. Before you even came here, you asked me on the phone about the money, and I told you the truth as I knew it. I would never have. She could hear the pleading in his voice, hear that he didn't want her to think badly of him. She didn't, but she thought she saved him from humiliation by saying nothing. Whatever did she do to make your grandfather take care of her and her brother for so many years? I don't know, and neither does Dad. Last night, he told me that when his father turned the Harcourt account over to him, he asked him that very question, but Gramps wouldn't tell him. Dad said that over the years he asked 100 times, but Gramps refused to confide in him. All Gramps would say was that Eddie believed in him when no one else did, and if she hadn't, his life would have been hell. He said he owed everything he had to Miss Eddie. What does that mean? Josh asked. Did she advise him to buy U.S. Steel at 10 cents a share? He brought it, the stock went up, and voila, he's rich. Maybe it was something like that. No, it couldn't have been that simple. If it was something like that, Gramps could have set up a trust for her in the open. I would have become a town legend, and everyone would have agreed that Gramps owed her. But this was something that was done in secrecy. Whatever Miss Eddie did for my grandfather, it was done without the town knowing about it. In this town, 2 men visited Tess on a Saturday night, and the next morning, everybody knew about it. Exactly. But something happened, something big. And because of that, Miss Eddie retired. My grandfather took care of her and her brother. I'm beginning to think that everything she told me was a lie. She didn't lie when she said she loved you. She wrote Gramps that you were a gift from God, something for her old age, Jocelyn. Ramsey said as he reached out and put his hand on her arms. I'll help you. I really will. You mean that you'll give me charity like your grandfather did? Your family are the true owners of the Edelin Manor. Then Luke will work for me, Ramsey said, and there was so much glee in his voice that Jocelyn laughed. What would he say if he knew you were paying him? Probably hit me in the face. He has the meanest left hook I've ever seen. I think my eyes were black half my childhood. And what wounds did he carry? None, Ramsey said. I turned the other cheek. She laughed again, only this time it was genuine. She looked back at the water. Okay, so I have to find a job. Hey, I know. Why don't you fire Tess and let me work for you? When Ramsey looked at her with eyes wide with horror, she grinned. Why not? I'll wear dresses. They'll have skirts down to my knees and there won't be any cowboy boots. If you don't quit saying these things, I'm going to tell Tess on you. Jocelyn put her hands up as though to shield her face from blows. Did I tell you what she said to me when I first met her? No, he said, but I heard what you said back to her. Something about honey catching more flies than a beautiful face. Good synopsis. She began to pack up the basket, but Ramsey sat where he was. I have something else to tell you. Jocelyn sat back down on the quilt. What else could you have to say to me? That I'm in debt? Please don't tell me there's some debt I've inherited and I have to pay it or I'll be dragged out to debtor's prison. He looked at her in astonishment. Do you read the same books that Sarah does? Pretty much. So what else do you have to tell me? I plan to keep this a secret. He took a breath. The truth is that I arranged this and I wasn't going to tell you. But last night when I found out the lies you've been told, well, I can't bring myself to tell you even the tiniest lie to add to all the others. That could be useful, she said, but he didn't smile. Look, Ramsey said, there's going to be a trick played on you this afternoon. Yeah, I know. You know? Luke told me. He's picking me up at 2, or at least he's supposed to pick me up then. He said you always took women to the Trillis restaurant for the second date, so he said he'd pick me up there. Ramsey snorted. He's trying to make you think I'm a stick in the mud and that I have a routine for my women. The truth is that I don't have a set routine and I don't have many dates. But Luke isn't what I was talking about. A cupcake trick is going to be played on you. A cupcake trick? Wait a minute, a cupcake trick. Is that some southern slang that I don't know about? No, it's my big mouth. After I left you on Saturday evening, I went next door to Tess' apartment. And talked about me? Jocelyn said, you told me. Ramsey gave her a quick look as though trying to figure out her tone. I told you that. He waved his hand in dismissal. It doesn't matter what or why, but I told her that you mentioned that you can make cupcakes, and she said I should make a cupcake crisis. A cupcake crisis? What is that? She meant I should get someone to pretend that he or she needs cupcakes more than life itself, and you are the only one who can make them. Jocelyn looked at him in consternation. I think I'm missing the point here. Why would someone need for me to make cupcakes? The truth? That would be nice. It started out as a way for me to get to know you better, a way for us to spend more time together. After our first date, I felt that we ran out of things to talk about. Exactly, he said. So after you left me, you went to Tess to ask her female opinion about what to do to get you and me more involved with each other? Yes, he said sheepishly. Sorry, She cut him off because she leaned across the quilt and kissed him on the lips. It wasn't a kiss of great passion, but it was a kiss that let him know she wasn't displeased with what he had said. Wow, he said, blinking at her. Was that was that because I told the truth? She didn't want to tell him why she kissed him. Maybe it was just relief that he really had gone to Tess to talk about her, Jocelyn. She knew it was stupid, but Miss Eddie said that Ramsey was the perfect man for her, and in a way, she felt like he was hers. She leaned back on the quilt and looked up at the leaves of the tree overhead. So tell me about this cupcake crisis. Ramsey moved towards her. I'd rather talk about kissing. No, not now, she said as she looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. I think I have other things in my life to resolve before serious kissing. Ramsey gave an ostentatious sigh and lay back on the quilt, the picnic basket between them. Tess took care of it, the cupcake crisis, that is. So, even before she met me, she knew that I needed something to occupy myself. Yes, Ramsey said as he put his hands behind his head and looked at the tree leaves. But she doesn't know the truth about the money. Joss, I know that everyone probably tells you that Tess warns you that Tess takes care of my entire life, but it's not true. Yes, I've learned to play dumb as she does the work. She is a workhorse if there ever was one, but there are many aspects about me that she knows nothing about, and you are at the head of that list. I'm sure this has to do with my having heard about you since I was a kid, and I know this is early, but Jocelyn, I like you a great deal. You're smart and funny, and I enjoy being with you. You make me feel good. Is that enough to base something between us on? Yes. Every word he said made her feel better. She didn't want to think she'd been jealous of Tess, but it was nice to be reassured that there was no reason to be. She sat up on the quilt and looked in the basket. Did you eat all of that pate? Every bite of it. He turned onto his side, his head in his hands. His eyes on her were warm. She had to make herself look away from him. Too soon, she thought. Much, much too soon. Miss Eddie said that women who attached themselves to one man right away spent their lives regretting that there had been no courtship. I agree. She said that David had courted her. It was a long time before I agreed to be his girlfriend. When she said the words, she always blushed. Jocelyn didn't like to think how that ardent courtship had turned out. Miss Eddie had come home from World War II, her legs a mass of scars, and found her beloved David married to another woman. So tell me about the cupcakes, Jocelyn said again as she spread cheese on a cracker. I don't know the details. You'll get a call from somebody, probably my sister, and probably tonight, and she'll ask if you know how to make a cupcake. This will be the children's party you invited me to? Ramsey took the cracker she handed him. Yes. Have you seen my kitchen? Sure, he said, chewing. He looked at her. It's bare. So how do you make cupcakes without whatever it takes to make cupcakes? I thought you could cook. My sister taught me how to make that pasta dish. It's the only thing I can cook. Jocelyn made a cheese cracker for herself and ate it while she thought. I guess your sister's doing this to get her poor unmarried brother hitched with a woman she thinks is rich and lives in the biggest, oldest house in town. Sure, my mother has despaired of my ever marrying, and it looks like my sister is also about to give up on me. So, I'm your last chance? Very last. He was smiling bigger by the minute. I'm getting the idea that you have something in mind. Do you know what the latest thing in children's food is? Dyeing it purple. That's so old school, she said. No, the latest thing is to dump a batch of puree spinach in with the chocolate. Ramsay gave her a look of such horror that she laughed. It just sounds bad. Actually, it tastes good. You put squash in their mac and cheese, zucchini in their hot dogs. Of course, the kids grow up never having actually eaten broccoli, but that's neither here nor there. The thing is to get them big and strong. When they go to college, they're on their own. A whole generation of children is going to grow up not knowing what real chocolate tastes like, Ramsay said, still looking as though this were the worst idea he ever had. Does your sister have any money? If she's part of your family, then she must be rich. What? Ramsay looked at her as though he couldn't believe what she was saying. If your sister had called me this morning and asked me to bake a few dozen cupcakes for a kid's party, I would have made them for her for free. But then I've been led to believe that I'd inherit a fortune with the house, not just a money pit that's going to take everything I earn just to keep the termites at bay. What I want to know is if your sister can afford to pay me for the cupcakes. Yeah, she can afford them. Her husband works at Bush and he makes good money. And of course, there's the trust fund from your grandfather. And there's the trust fund from my grandfather, Ramsay said, smiling. What's going on in that pretty little mind of yours? I don't think I want to spend my life making cupcakes, but for now, I can't think of anything else I can do. Sarah said there weren't any good jobs in Edelen. None that I know of. People either work elsewhere or they open their own business. Maybe you and Sarah could do something together. Open a dress shop where I serve a customer's cupcake? I don't think so. Besides, if I started doing this baking full time and started making money at it, you'd have the health inspector down your neck, Ramsay said. Right. Sometimes I almost forget that you're a lawyer. Is there a compliment in that? Jocelyn was looking at the stream and thinking hard. Okay, so I'll have one chance to show the world, meeting Edelen and the surrounding area, what I can do. If I do a good enough job, maybe I can earn enough money to feed myself until this is making me feel bad, Ramsay said. I'm the one who steamrolled you into quitting your job and coming here. I told you there was money with the house. Please, please hang on to that guilt. I may use it if I need a loan. In the distance, she heard a horn blow. What time is it? Ramsay grimaced. I don't need a watch to know it's 2 o'clock. Why are you going out with Luke? She was tossing things into the baskets. Plants. We have to buy lavender. What for? He picked up one end of the quilt and Jocelyn the other. Cookies. I can make those too. You certainly don't seem upset to hear that you're broke. I think maybe someone just lit a fire under me. When the horn blew again, she looked at him. Go on, he said. I'll get this. Thanks, she said as she turned toward the path, then looked back at him. $3.25? What? That's what they charge in New York for super cupcakes. $3.25. Of course they do, he said, his face showing his shock at the price. All right, I'll get my brother-in-law to agree to the price. I'll champion you, but if those cupcakes are awful, you'll make me look like a fool, and you won't get another job around town. I'll make you proud, she said as the horn blew again. My car keys are in the basket, he nodded, and she took off running. And that's the end of chapter 8. Well, he told her, right, that she is broke. So that means she don't have to stay there. She could actually sell the house and leave. But I did see a little bit more involvement with him, a little bit more, letting her in a little bit and letting down his guard a little bit and not being so stuffy or whatnot. And he finally told her that he really liked her. And it's all due to the letters. Is that fair enough to say? That you like her just from the letters and she want to be with him just because Miss Eddie wrote in her will that she should? I'm still stuck on that. Yeah, as you can see, I'm still stuck on that. I just don't think that she should put her, just like he said, like, if you're not courtshiping her, you're going to feel guilty of choosing that. So, and then he was so easy to be like, oh, so you going somewhere with Luke? I don't know. But let's see how her day with Luke gonna go. See you in the next chapter. Bye for now.